Okay, picture this. A country completely up in flames. Streets are chaotic. The government is on the verge of collapse. Now, what if I told you the trigger for all of this wasn't some huge political scandal or a massive economic crash? Nope. It was a ban on a few apps. So how on earth does a digital rule manage to bring down an entire government? Let's get into it. Yeah, that's the big question here, right? How can just 26 apps topple a government? It sounds almost made up, but this is exactly what went down in Nepal. How did the platforms we scroll through every single day suddenly become the spark for a full-blown political revolution? And look, we're not talking about some obscure apps you've never heard of. The ban went right for the jugular. The absolute titans of social media. We're talking Facebook, X, YouTube, and WhatsApp. For millions of people, these aren't just apps. They're the digital town square. So shutting them down, that felt like a deeply personal attack. All right, so let's rewind a bit. Where did this all start? Well, this whole massive firestorm can be traced back to one single government decision. This was the digital spark that was about to set the whole country ablaze. Now, on the surface, the government tried to frame this as just a legal thing, not some big censorship move. They put out this directive saying, hey, these 26 platforms need to register under our new law. When the companies didn't or couldn't comply in time, boom, the government just pulled the plug. A nationwide ban, just like that. But, and this is so important, for Nepal's younger generation, for Gen Z, this had nothing to do with bureaucratic paperwork. To them, this was a clear and direct threat to their freedom of expression, It was a line in the sand, and they were absolutely not gonna let it slide. And what happens when an entire generation feels like its basic rights are under attack? Well, that anger doesn't just stay behind a screen. It spilled out fast. That online rage turned into very real, very physical conflict. The streets just erupted. And the escalation was, wow, it was incredibly fast and pretty brutal. Protests almost immediately turned into violent clashes with police. We saw tear gas, water cannons. There were even reports of live ammunition being fired. It got so intense that government buildings, including the one that houses their parliament, were stormed and literally set on fire. And this, unfortunately, is where the story takes a really tragic turn. The human cost of this uprising was just devastating. In all that chaos, dozens of people were killed. And to make matters even worse, on top of those deaths, more than 1,000 people were injured. These aren't just numbers. They really drive home the sheer scale of the violence that exploded from what started as a simple app ban.
So, with this level of chaos gripping the entire nation, the political system just couldn't take the strain. It was buckling. The government was about to completely collapse, and the political dominoes started falling with just breathtaking speed.
I mean, look at how fast this all happened. First, you get these massive protests exploding nationwide. The government panics and tries to backtrack. They lift the ban, but it's way too little, way too late. The public pressure is just unstoppable at this point, and it forces the Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, to resign. And just like that, the government was gone. People were already talking about who would lead the interim government. But, a prime minister resigning doesn't just magically fix everything. This situation on the ground was still incredibly volatile. To try and get some kind of control back, the authorities had to impose curfews and even deploy the army onto the streets. So this brings us to a really crucial question. Was all of this entire political collapse, really just about some social media apps? The short answer is no. The app ban was the spark, for sure, but to understand why the explosion was so massive, we have to look at the fuel that had been piling up for years.
And this right here is the heart of the story. The spark? Absolutely. It was the ban on those 26 platforms. But the fuel? Man, that was years and years of simmering frustration over really deep-seated issues. Things like systemic corruption, crippling inequality, blatant nepotism, and just this feeling of a total lack of opportunity for regular people. The app ban wasn't the cause. It was just the final match thrown onto a giant pile of dry wood. And that's exactly why, when you look at what the protesters were actually demanding, it went way beyond just getting their apps back. I mean, yeah, they wanted social media restored, of course, but their real goal was fundamental systemic change. They were demanding real action against corruption, more transparency and accountability from their leaders, and even brand new elections. This was a movement for a total overhaul. So, after the dust settled, after the government fell, Where did all this leave Nepal? Well, the uprising came at an incredibly high price, and it's cast this long, uncertain shadow over the nation's future. When you look at the fallout, the consequences are just staggering, and they hit every part of society. You've got the heartbreaking human cost, the dozens killed, the 1,000+ injured, the families left grieving. Then there's the massive economic disruption. Businesses had to shut down, supply chains were broken, daily life just ground to a halt. And maybe most critically, you're left with this profound political instability. The government's gone, there's a leadership vacuum, and the path forward is anything but clear. And that really brings us to the final lingering question here. The protesters, in a way, they won. They achieved their immediate goal. They toppled a government and they got their digital freedoms back. So you could say they won the battle. But with the country still facing all these deep systemic problems and now a completely uncertain political landscape, the much bigger question is, can they actually win the future?